Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack some complex global stories for you.
That's right. And today, we've got a really fascinating mix, showing just how interconnected everything is.
Absolutely. We'll start in our science section, looking at India's scientific landscape.
Then we jump into the FAQ section. We've got quantum tech, the Israel-Iran conflict, and DNA forensics.
After that, our profile section tackles Iran's nuclear history and the critical Strait of Hormuz.
And we finish up with a really important story from the magazine section about Indian students facing visa issues in the U.S.
Okay, let's dive right in. So first up, India's standing in global science. It's kind of surprising, right? You'd think with funding cuts elsewhere like the U.S., India might be a magnet for scientists.
You would think so, but the article highlights a Nobel laureate, Vanikraman Ramakrishnan, who gives a pretty different view.
Oh, what does he say?
He explicitly states, "I do not see India as a general magnet for international science." Which really makes you ask, why not?
Yeah, especially when, as you mentioned, the U.S. is facing huge cuts, like $18 billion at the NIH, $5 billion at the NSF.
Exactly. And Nature polled U.S. scientists 75% said they'd be keen to leave. So the opportunity seems to be there.
So what's holding India back, according to Professor Ramakrishnan? He mentions pain points.
Yes, several really significant ones. Things like major delays in getting funds released.
How delayed are we talking?
Months. And even research scholars not getting paid their scholarships sometimes for, up to a year.
A year, wow. That makes research almost impossible.
It really does. Cripples long-term work. Then there's the issue of science policies changing, kind of whimsically, without much discussion.
So instability in funding and policy, what about the institutions themselves?
He makes the point that even the top places, like IIC or the IITs, are really only world-class in very specific areas, not broadly.
Okay, so it's fragmented excellence, perhaps.
Sort of, and that impacts the overall research environment.
And what about the big picture, the overall investment in R&D? How does India stack up?
Well, that's another major point. The estimate for 2025 is only about 0.6 to 0.7% of GDP spent on R&D.
Which is?
Much less than China. And maybe a third or even less of what many developed countries invest.
That's a huge gap.
It is. And there's another imbalance, very little private funding for R&D in India. It's almost the opposite of developed countries where private money often doubles government spending.
So the government's big announcement, that 50,000 crore fund.
The Anusanthan National Research Foundation, yeah, it sounds big, about $6 billion US, but only about 14,000 crore is actually budgeted by the government.
And the rest?
It's expected from donations from any other sources, which, raises questions about reliability.
Right. So beyond funding and policy, did the article mention other deterrents, social factors?
It did, and it's quite stark. Things like, quoting here, filthy streets, unbreathable air, sidewalks not navigable, things that impact daily life quality for someone relocating.
That's pretty blunt. But what about the researchers already there?
Yes. Professor Ramakrishnan is full of praise for them. He says he's always amazed by how they manage to do such good work in such difficult conditions and yet be so cheerful.
So the talent is there, despite the hurdles.
Absolutely. He stresses India has this demographic dividend, a huge young population, but he warns it's a temporary advantage.
Meaning?
Meaning if India doesn't fix these systemic issues and harness that potential, it risks falling behind other Asian countries and the West in the long run.
A really important warning. Okay, let's shift gears now into our FAQ section. We're looking at a major tech breakthrough.
Yeah, this is fascinating. IIT Delhi scientists working with the DRDO, that's the Defense Research and Development Organization, demonstrated quantum communication.
Over quite a distance too, right? More than a kilometer.
In free space, yes.
Right.
Over a kilometer. It definitely sounds like science fiction.
So break it down for us. What exactly is quantum communication?
Well, it's basically a term for using quantum physics principles for communication. The key idea here is often quantum entanglement.
Entanglement. That's the spooky action at a distance thing.
Kind of, yeah. Imagine you create two photons, these tiny light particles, linked together. If you measure something about one, you instantly know the same about the other, no matter how far apart they are.
Okay.
So you can use this to create communication channels that are essentially leak-proof. If someone tries to eavesdrop to intercept a photon,
It disturbs the other one.
exactly, the entanglement breaks or gets disturbed, and you know immediately the channel isn't secure anymore.
So the goal is completely secure communication. Secure against any kind of hacking or computational attack.
Precisely. It protects against computational attacks, even from future quantum computers, potentially. A big part of this is something called QKD.
KKD.
Quantum key distribution. Think of it like this. You need a secret key to encrypt and decrypt sensitive messages, right?
Sure.
QKD is a way for the sender and receiver to generate an identical, perfectly secret key using those quantum principles. It doesn't encrypt the message itself. You still use normal methods like AES for that.
AES, the standard encryption we use now.
Right. But QKD makes sure the key used for that encryption is absolutely private. Nobody could have intercepted it without you knowing.
And the IIT Delhi team achieved this.
Yes, using entanglement-based QKD through the air. They got a secure key rate of nearly 240 bits per second.
It's that fast.
For this kind of tech, it's pretty good. And the error rate, the quantum bit error rate, was less than 7%, which is considered acceptable.
Okay, so 240 bits per second, low error rate. What's the ultimate aim here? Where does this technology go next?
The really big goal is reliable QKD between a ground station and a satellite, hundreds of kilometers up.
A satellite. Why?
Because then the satellite could distribute these ultra-secure keys to potentially anywhere in India just by beaming down photons. Imagine a national network secured this way.
That would be a game changer.
Yeah.
Has India done other work in this area?
Oh, yes. This builds on previous work. There was a quantum link set up in Uttar Pradesh back in 2022. And earlier this year, they achieved QKD over 100 kilometers of optical fiber.
So step-by-step progress. The defense minister apparently called this a game changer.
Yes, especially for future warfare, securing military communications. But the applications go way beyond defense.
Like where?
Think banking, financial transactions, telecoms, protecting user data, anywhere where security is absolutely critical. It promises a truly secure digital future.
And the government is backing this.
Seems so. They approved the National Quantum Mission with a budget of 6,000 crore, that's around 720 million US dollars, specifically to push these kinds of advancements forward.
Huge potential then. Okay, let's move to our next topic in the FAQ section. A very different kind of challenge, the Israel-Iran conflict and its impact on India.
Yeah, this is incredibly complex and volatile. India has strong ties with both Israel and Iran, so it's walking a very tricky diplomatic tightrope.
How did the latest escalation unfold, according to the article?
It mentions Israel's preemptive strikes on Iranian nuclear sites and the assassination of top generals around June 13th. This was followed by what the article calls Iran's more robust than expected ballistic missile response.
And India's reaction?
Very cautious. Prime Minister Modi apparently shared India's concern and stressed the need to restore peace quickly.
Cautious, okay. But are there more specific diplomatic signals? How is India positioning itself?
Well, the External Affairs Minister, S. Jaishankar, urged against retaliation and pushed for diplomacy. But interestingly, the official statement from the Ministry of External Affairs didn't criticize Israel.
No criticism of Israel.
Right. And India actually distanced itself from a statement by the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SKO, that did condemn Israel's actions.
And didn't India also abstain on a UN vote recently?
Yes, last week. A UN resolution for a ceasefire in Gaza. India abstained, which is a shift from its older, more consistently pro-Palestinian stance.
So the message seems to be avoiding criticism of Israel while still calling for peace.
That appears to be the delicate balance they're trying to strike.
What about the human impact? There are many Indians in both countries.
Yes, thousands. There's actually an evacuation effort called Operation Sindhu underway.
To bring people home.
Exactly. Around 10,000 students and professionals from Iran and maybe 25,000 workers, students, researchers from Israel.
25,000 from Israel. Wow.
Yeah, apparently many moved there fairly recently, taking jobs that opened up after Palestinian workers were dismissed after October 7th last year.
And is Iran cooperating with the evacuations?
Yes. The article mentions Iran has even opened its airspace specifically for chartered flights bringing Indian citizens home.
That's something, amidst the tension. Okay, beyond the evacuations, what are the economic worries for India? Trade, energy.
Trade with both countries has actually been declining lately. With Iran, it's way down due to sanctions from $14 billion in 2017 to just $1.4 billion last year.
And Israel?
Down too, from $11 billion in 2022 to $3.75 billion. Though defense imports from Israel have gone up significantly.
But the biggest economic pinch would be?
Trade route disruptions, especially the Strait of Hormuz. If that gets closed or becomes too risky.
We'll talk more about Hormuz later, but that's the big energy conduit, right?
Absolutely. 40 to 50% of India's energy imports, oil and LNG, come through there. Disruption means much higher prices, costly imports, and likely inflation back home.
And the geopolitical fallout.
Yeah.
India's position globally.
It's tough. You've got the US and G7 backing Israel, while much of the global south is more sympathetic to Iran. India's stuck in the middle, especially in forums like BRICS, which now includes Iran itself.
Right. And relations with the Gulf states.
That's crucial too. They're a huge source of remittances, about 40%, and over half of India's oil imports. Maintaining those ties is vital. Plus, big projects like the India-Middle East-Europe corridor are basically stalled now.
And the Chabahar port project in Iran.
Also affected by the instability. Really, the article concludes, New Delhi's best hope is just for the conflict to end quickly.
A complex web indeed. Let's move to our final FAQ topic, DNA fingerprinting. This is being used after that tragic Air India crash near Ahmedabad.
Yes, a terrible event, 270 lives lost. DNA fingerprinting becomes absolutely crucial in situations like this for identification and giving families closure.
How does it work? I mean, aren't we all mostly identical genetically?
We are, about 99.9%. But that tiny 0.1% difference holds the key. It contains specific sequences called STRs.
STRs.
Short tandem repeats. Think of them as unique genetic markers, like little barcodes scattered through our DNA. They vary hugely between people.
Except identical twins, I assume.
Exactly, except for identical twins. So these STRs are the go-to markers for identifying individuals and also for establishing family relationships, matching victims to relatives.
So it's like a definitive genetic fingerprint. How do they collect samples in a disaster situation? It must be challenging.
Extremely challenging. Ideally, you collect tissue, nails, bone, maybe body fluid, and preservation is key freezing or storing in ethanol. But the article quotes Dr. Rakesh Mishra
from the Tata Institute for Genetics and Society.
Yes. He stresses that only highly trained forensic experts should collect samples to avoid contamination. Because, really, the quality of that initial sample dictates everything.
What are the main challenges with samples from something like a plane crash? Degradation, contamination.
Both are huge issues. The sheer force of impact, maybe fire, exposure to the environment, it can badly degrade the DNA. Contamination from other sources or mixing of remains can lead to ambiguous or just plain wrong results.
The technology can handle this now.
Current tech is described as powerful and sensitive. The key is a technique called PCR.
PCR, polymerase chain reaction. We heard a lot about that during COVID.
Exactly. It's like a genetic photocopier. It can take tiny, even degraded fragments of DNA and make millions or billions of copies.
Amplifying the signal.
Precisely. So you have enough material to analyze. Then other advanced systems create that distinctive DNA profile to compare against databases or relative samples.
This must be standard practice in mass casualty events now.
Absolutely critical. The article mentions its use after the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, the Victorian bushfires in Australia in 2009 where bodies were badly burned.
MH17.
MH17 in 2014, yes. Even going back to the 9/11 attacks, it's standard in criminal cases, of course, but in disasters, it provides identification when nothing else can.
So the key is sample integrity and careful processing.
Definitely. Continuous training for forensic teams using the latest techniques and strict standardized protocols are all vital to get accurate results under very difficult circumstances.
Okay, moving to our profile section now. We're back to Iran, looking at its nuclear history, described as a roller coaster.
Yeah, that captures it well. The article breaks it down into roughly 4 phases. It didn't start with confrontation, actually.
Really? How did it begin?
Initially, under the Shah, back when Iran signed the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1968, they were seen as a model state. They cooperated, got access to civilian nuclear tech. This lasted until the Islamic Revolution in '79.
So compliant at first. When did things start getting ambiguous?
That's the second phase, roughly 1979 to 2002. Ayatollah Khomeini wasn't initially keen on nuclear weapons. But then the Iran-Iraq War happened in the 80s, and Saddam Hussein used chemical weapons against Iran.
Which made them reconsider their defenses.
It seems so. There were signs they were building up technical knowledge, but nothing overt pointing to a weapons program. That changed dramatically in 2002.
That happened in 2002.
Dissident groups revealed the existence of secret nuclear facilities in Natanz and Iraq, which Iran hadn't declared under the NPT.
So that's when the crisis really began.
Exactly. That launched the third phase. The IAEA, the UN nuclear watchdog, investigated and concluded Iran wasn't complying with its obligations.
Leading to sanctions.
Punishing UN Security Council sanctions, yeah. From about 2006 to 2014, Iran had actually agreed to more intrusive inspections in 2003 under the additional protocol, but they stopped implementing it in 2006 out of frustration.
But there was a diplomatic breakthrough eventually.
Yes, the JCPOA Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2015. That was a major turning point. Iran agreed to strict limits on its nuclear program,
In exchange for...
sanctions relief. It showed, as the article puts it, that rational diplomacy could still work.
But as we know, the JCPOA didn't hold.
No. Which brings us to the fourth and current phase. In 2018, President Trump pulled the U.S. out of the deal unilaterally and reimposed those maximum pressure sanctions.
And Iran's response.
They started rolling back their own compliance. By 2022, the article says, Iran had advanced its nuclear program significantly, enriching uranium to, quote, a hair's breadth from the level required to make an atomic weapon.
That close. That's incredibly alarming.
It is, and it reversed years of diplomatic effort very quickly.
So where does that leave things now, especially with the recent Israeli strikes?
It's highly dangerous and uncertain. European countries worry about the entire non-proliferation regime collapsing. Article X of the NPT technically allows a country to withdraw if extraordinary events threaten its interests.
And Israel's attacks could be cited as such an event.
Potentially, yes. Iran's current president says they don't want nuclear weapons, but the article suggests their path to diplomacy feels blocked, so they'll likely keep one hand on the nuclear option.
And the international monitors.
They warn that continued conflict, continued bombing, could lead to one of two outcomes. Either a nuclear-armed Iran or a war to stop them getting there. Both scenarios are exactly what the NPT was designed to prevent.
A truly precarious situation. Okay, staying in the region for our next profile piece, let's talk about the Strait of Hormuz. A geographic choke point with huge significance, right?
Huge is right. It's outsized importance, as the article puts it. It's this narrow strip of water, less than 100 kilometers wide at its narrowest, separating Iran from the Arabian Peninsula.
But critical for trade.
Absolutely critical. About a quarter of the entire world's oil supply passes through it. In 2024, that's an average of 20 million barrels per day.
20 million barrels a day.
Yeah. Yeah. It connects major producers like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Qatar, the UAE, to the rest of the world. A vital energy artery.
So any disruption there has immediate global consequences. Iran has threatened it before, you mentioned.
They have. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 80s, the so-called tanker war, both sides attacked shipping there. More recently, in 2019, after the U.S. left the nuclear deal, Iran seized a British tanker, the Stena Impero.
And shot down a U.S. drone.
Right. They've shown they can interfere. Now, a complete shutdown. The article says that has no historical precedent and is probably unlikely because of the massive global response it would trigger. But disruptions, definitely expected if the Israel-Iran conflict continues.
What kind of disruptions are we talking about? Higher prices?
Yeah.
Delays?
We already saw a brief spike in oil prices, though they came down again. But sustained conflict means likely delays for shipping, much higher insurance costs for tankers going through the area, maybe rerouting, all adding to the cost.
And for India, this is particularly worrying.
Extremely worrying. India is heavily reliant on the region. We mentioned earlier about 40% of its crude oil imports and over 54% of its liquefied natural gas imports come through Hormuz.
Can you put that in volume terms again?
Out of the 5.5 million barrels of oil India uses daily, about 1.5 million barrels come through that strait.
So India must be looking at alternatives.
Yes. Union Minister Hardeep Singh Puri mentioned they'll consider other sources, like maybe West Africa, if Hormuz gets blocked.
Are there other routes? Pipelines?
There are some land-based pipelines run by Saudi Arabia or the UAE, for example, but they just don't have the capacity to replace the massive volume that goes through the strait by sea.
So no easy alternatives.
Not really, which is why, as the article says, when trouble brews in West Asia, all eyes are on the Strait of Hormuz. It's a real flashpoint.
Okay, for our final deep dive, we turn to the magazine section. This is about Indian students in the U.S. facing sudden visa revocations. A really difficult situation for them.
Yeah, deeply personal and very impactful. The article mentions over 1,800 students affected across nearly 250 different colleges. They're just left in limbo.
It gives an example, Kabir.
Yes, his visa was actually reinstated in California, seemingly out of the blue. But, and this is the crazy part, he still can't leave the U.S. and come back in.
Why not?
Because the cancellation is on his record. So even if a court addresses the issue, if your visa was canceled at some point, you're essentially stuck inside the U.S. until you get a completely new visa stamp, which often requires leaving. It's a real catch-22.
So the American dream turning into a bureaucratic nightmare for some. Is this affecting the number of Indian students choosing the U.S.?
Definitely seems to be. Indian students are currently the largest group of international students in the U.S., 4.2 lakh, that's 420,000, in 2024.
Huge number.
But the analysis of SEVIS data, which tracks students, shows a projected drop of nearly 28% for 2025. That's almost 100,000 fewer Indian students choosing the U.S.
Wow, a 28% decline? That's massive.
It is. The article calls it a massive shift in the mentality. Students just feel less comfortable coming to the U.S. now. The uncertainty is too high.
And the economic impact of that must be significant, both for the U.S. and for the families in India.
Absolutely. International students overall contribute billions, nearly $44 billion in 2023-24. Indian students alone account for almost $12 billion of that.
And beyond the dollars.
They're a huge part of industry and innovation, as the article says. Losing them impacts research, tech development, and for the families back in India. Sending a child to the U.S. often involves years of savings. Costs can be $40,000 to $60,000 US dollars per year.
So visa uncertainty makes it a huge financial risk.
A very high-risk investment, yeah.
What's actually causing these revocations? Is there a pattern? The article mentions Harvard.
Yeah, it uses Harvard as an example. The Department of Homeland Security actually revoked Harvard's ability to enroll international students for a time,
Why?
citing concerns over campus activism and alleged anti-Semitism. This froze billions in funding and even threatened Harvard's accreditation.
Is that resolved?
A federal judge issued a temporary restraining order, but the article highlights the immediate and irreparable injury to the students caught in the middle. It's created this chilling effect across campuses.
A chilling effect? How so?
To the point where some students are literally going from dorm to classroom carrying their passports, just in case, out of fear.
That's an awful way to live and study. So if the U.S. is looking less appealing or more risky, where are Indian students looking instead?
They're diversifying, looking at countries like France, New Zealand, Germany, even places like Bangladesh, Russia, Ireland, Uzbekistan. Spreading their options.
It's a major shift.
It is. One clinician quoted suggests it's maybe an opportunity for students to, realign and think of the best way to make an impact. But the immediate reality is tough. It's a crisis about belonging, about who gets to learn and dream far from home.
And the emotional cost must be immense for those stuck.
Absolutely. Stuck, waiting, wanting to go home but unable to leave. Just caught in this limbo. A really difficult situation underscoring individual vulnerability in these larger global shifts.
Thank you for listening. If today's episode gave you something useful, consider following us on Spotify so you're the first to hear the next one. You can give suggestions by contacting our Twitter handle given in the episode description. We are always eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.